right. So Brad, you had the story for me this week for about your son, and I want to hear this.
It was kind of this has been brewing for a while, and I was shocked by my own reaction. My older son Alex has and you can tell we did a Patreon exclusive. He did the Russian accent to prove that somebody from the Geigers could do accents.
Right. Yes.
He's been fascinated over the last several months with writing comedy. And he comes up to me and says, "Dad, I think I really want to write comedy." And this was my son that for years was super shy, hiding behind the teacher, it wouldn't come out. And now he's in high school taking an improv class, and he's watching stand-up, and not only watching stand-up, but dissecting it. Like he'll do that thing where he says, "Okay, that was funny because he built it up, and then he paused, and then he delivered it." He goes, "It wasn't such a great punchline, but the way he delivered it made it funny." He's analyzing it, and I'm scared to death.
Oh. You're scared to death because of the life of pain of an artist, or what are you scared of?
Well, yes, I was shocked by my own reaction, because you'd think that it would be, oh my gosh, he wants to do something creative like this. What a great thing. It's been a very good life for me, but at the same time, it's been a very difficult life. And there's a part of me that wanted him to say, "I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a doctor, I want to be any number of things." But this, even though I know realistically those are fraught with pitfalls too.
Sure.
But it was like that John Adams quote, or at least it gets attributed to him, where it was, "I am a warrior so that my children may be merchants, so that their children may be poets." And then I remember distinctly, Dave, you had a comic where it took that one more step and said, of those children of poets, they had to be warriors again to pay off the bills that the poets.
Yeah. John Adams' great grandson racked up a lot of credit card bills. He's like, "Well, I got to go back and I'm going to be a regional sales manager."
Looks like it's time to sharpen up those swords again.
Yeah, what's great about that is that you're like, listen, son, I love you so much, but Daddy is the cartoonist. I need you to go into regional accounting because I can't pay my bills. Listen, son, I love that Obamacare exists, but Daddy's going to have some medical bills in his 70s.
And Daddy would like to retire at some point. And it's also, here's the other thing is, as a parent, I always dialed that back. In other words, I never wanted my love of comics and my love of humor to be attached to my love for my kids. I never wanted them to think, "Oh, Dad doesn't love me because I'm not very funny." Or Dad doesn't love me because I'm not good at comics. I never wanted those two things to be attached. You hear all these stories about Tiger Woods, right, when he's grown. And I just heard it on the radio this morning where it was talking about, his dad put him in a high chair when he was 3 years old and had the 3-year-old watch Dad swing a golf club for hours on end. And then it was like, then he put a golf club in his hand. And then there was this. And I never wanted to have my love of comics attached to a father's love, Right. And it thrills me to no end that when I watch him like writing and watch him wrestle down a punchline or listen to him do voices, do impersonations so much better than I ever could. And it thrills me, but I'm scared of having those two things intersect with whether I love my kid or not,
Yeah, no, it's a natural thing to want to do, because you also know that in his teens and his 20s, those are where you take all the critical lumps, where the first criticisms are always the hardest, and you internalize them for a couple of years, And then it takes a decade or so of putting out art before you go, you know what, shine it. I like who I am, and I like the work that I'm producing, and to heck with this sad person that's criticizing me,
Yeah.
But he's going to have to go through those lumps, so I get it. I completely get that. Oh, Brad, we're doing Cats in the Cradle again this week.
I know. Here we are.
My boy was
torturing
just like me.
ourselves once again.
My boy was just like me. All right. Well, then on that note, let's warm it up and welcome everybody to ComicLab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. And Dave, I will give you the pleasure of introducing that melodious voice that we've heard so far.
That melodious, and let me be frank and earn some points here, smoking hot voice. The world may know her as the executive producer, co-showrunner, and director on Netflix's One Day at a Time, or you may know her from her recurring acting role on Jane the Virgin, or her turn doing a drunken narration on Drunk History, or you may know her from her past work on How I Met Your Mother, or iZombie, or Devious Maids, or Rules of Engagement, or perhaps in her proudest gig when she was doing stand-up comedy with Dave Kellett in terrible comedy clubs 20 years ago with Chris Hardwick and Ava Longoria, which we just remembered last night as we were driving by the club. And she is also the winner of this year's Television Academy Honors, and for the past 14 years, the winner of the Cutest Wife Award. It is my wife, Gloria Calderón Kellett, who is here with me.
Good morning. I like that he said 14 years because it's been 17. Anyway.
Has it? Wait a minute. Let me do that. It has been 17 years.
It's been 17 years.
Oh my God, Brad.
Anyway, perfect. It couldn't be more perfect.
Well, Brad, you just got a complete summary of our marriage. Like the intro with all the best intentions, all the compliments,
so nice,
all
so
the love,
nice,
all the love, and then I mess up a key fact. I mess up a key fact.
Beautiful, and then
like it's all sweet, and then I'm like, so please welcome Susan, my wife, and she's like, nope, Gloria,
not my name, not my name.
It's not Susan.
Good morning.
Good morning, and how are you?
I'm so great.
I heard you guys had a little bit of a rough morning this morning.
We did. We woke up late. Listen, every once in a while, I'll still try to make a young woman's attempt to do something like wake up at 5 a.m. and attend a spin class. Like that's a thing that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And we didn't make it. And because I didn't make that spin class,
none of our alarms were.
Yeah.
It was a whole series of events.
There's a whole series of events.
Well, hold on. We should back up. We should tell Brad what really happened, though. Is that so? Brad, for the Emmy season, they send out screeners of television shows. You know.
Yeah.
And what's fun when you get the screeners is sometimes you get the whole season ahead of time. Ooh. So we have the whole on DVD or Blu-ray, whatever it is. We have the whole season of Handmaid's Tale, and they've still got like 4 more episodes to come out on air on Hulu. Mm-hmm. But we binged it last night and watched, and so we were up watching till like 1:30,
late and then very upset,
and then very upset at the ending. It was just
crawl
like
in bed with our children and hold them and weep.
You just want to throw down a scotch and shiver in the bedroom.
Yeah, so it did make it impossible for me to rise and spin my guts out.
Oh God!
So it was a crazy.
So we owe a late morning to Margaret Atwood.
Yes,
and there we go.
If I had a nickel every time I heard that sentence. we have the same thing that happens in the Geiger family, and thank God this is the last week of school, because every morning it's the same thing with my younger son. I wake him up as soon as I get out of the shower, and I go over and I wake him up and I say, Max, it's time to wake up, and kind of tussle his hair and wait till I see the eyes open and say, you ready for a new day? And he says, yeah, I'm ready for a new day. And grumbles, And
go to hell, old man.
When you guys are this is what you're in for, because right now you don't realize that you're in the glory days of mornings. Your kids wake up.
Boy, it doesn't feel like it, Brad.
You haven't. I don't know that you've seen our 5-year-old wake up. He's a grizzly.
My memory of them being at that age, or my kids being at that age, is they woke up happy for the most part, and they woke up when it was still morning. You could still say it was morning. And as they get older, my older son can easily sleep until well past noon, 1 o'clock. And as my younger son, Max, gets, he's going to be 13 in January. He's getting more and more teenager. So he's sleeping in. It's harder and harder to wake these kids up as they get older.
I can't wait till they sleep so much, Brad. I can't wait, because that means I will also sleep.
Yeah, that part is nice, I do have to say. But every morning, it's the same thing with Max. I wake him up. I wait till his eyes open. Tell him to have a good morning, blah, 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 that fatherly stuff. Go downstairs and start on getting lunches packed for the school day and getting breakfast made. And around about the time it's like 15 minutes to when we've got to leave, I go to the foot of the stairs and I yell up and I say, Max, are you dressed? And every morning he says the same thing. Why doesn't anybody wake me up?
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, it's the same thing morning after morning after morning. So I'm super thrilled that in a couple of days, I'm not going to be doing that anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, you can escape the Groundhog Day that is that same conversation every morning. Yeah.
Wow.
So, Brad, we have a unique opportunity. Let's jump right into it because so Glow as a TV writer and a TV showrunner has a lot of parallel creativity angles, but differences from what we do as cartoonists. And you had a really good question. We were talking about this last night. You had a really good question you wanted to lead off with Gloria. So you want to tee that one up for us?
Oh, yeah, because I've been dying to ask. Because I obviously the first season of One Day at a Time comes out, and I watch it. I cannot wait to watch. And then I don't binge a whole lot. This one I binged, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Just every step, every beat. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And it's done, and everybody's and I'm watching on Twitter and Facebook people saying how much they're loving it, and I'm really enjoying vicariously watching you take the victory lap here and there. And then it comes out that you've been approved for season number 2. Very relatively, as I remember it, quickly, although probably it didn't feel quick to you.
It to me.
But here it is, boom. The season is over, and then boom, you've been picked up. And my first thought was, oh my God, she's just barely, wiping the confetti off of her jacket from the celebration. And now she's got to stare at that blank page again. And my question to you is, what do you do with that blank page? How do you after coming off of that high, how do you deal with starting from square one all over again and writing something new, especially something that's got to be as good as that previous thing was?
That's a great question. Well, I would say what's interesting about that journey for me is that the anxiety is never in the work. The anxiety is in the lack of work. So the months in between where you're waiting are the torture.
Yeah, yeah.
Are we coming back? Is this happening? Getting the green light and going back is joyful because I love breaking story. I love talking about characters. I love, Mike Royce, who's my partner in running this show. He and I text constantly. It speaks to our spouses' love and understanding that they don't think we're having an affair because we are constantly like, oh my God, I had a great idea. Oh my God, I had a great idea. And his children, he's a decade older than me, as are his kids. So his kids are teenagers, mine are small.
Yeah.
And he has a lot of kid stuff. And then I have a lot of stuff that happens with my family. So those things sort of converge into this show. So I love the breaking of it. The blank page never frightens me.
Mm-hmm.
I always know that I'm going to have a lot to fill, and it's what do I want to say? And in terms of the how do you top yourself kind of thing, I don't think of it that way either, just because you can't repeat. We can't do that quinceañera show again, and we can't do that initial journey again. And that's okay. There's another journey that this family can go on that's interesting and emotional. And so I can't really compare the seasons. I know that, Justina, we're almost done breaking season 3. Mm-hmm. And the actors, our first table read is Monday. And, Justina's like, well, what do you think about last season? Because last year when she asked me, I said, oh, it's better than season 1. I just felt that creatively. And then, of course, the actors elevate the material. But this year she asked me and I said, oh, it's still really so good. And she goes, last year you said it was bad. And I said, no, but because you can't compare. You can't compare. Spoiler alert, there's a very emotional parent-child thing that happens at the end of season 2.
Yeah.
And that's, you can't do that every season.
Yeah.
So we're doing different stuff that's also really emotional and grounded and talking about life. And so the fact that we still get to do that is really great. So to answer your question, the blank page is the delight.
Wow.
It is the lack of page that I don't care for.
Well, let's circle back on this, because I think it'd be fun for the world and me, who even gets to see it. How would you describe your writing process? Like, how do you sit down and start from a blank page?
I think that, I think the page is filled before I sit down. I think most of my writing happens before I sit down to actually write it.
Mm-hmm.
I will often think about the stories, think about the characters, think about the journey. When Mike and I write, I monologue a lot, and he'll type. He becomes editor sometimes, where I'll just monologue and he'll write down what he thinks is good, and he has an excellent ear for what works. So most of the time certainly before the script, and this is also just part of the traditional process of television writing, we have to do an outline first, which is a gift. Because really the work is the outline. The work is laying out.
What do you mean by that? Why is that the outline?
Because that's when you're breaking the journey. That's when you're doing, when in our writer's room. So if people don't know, the way a comedy writing room works is there's, 8 to 12 writers in a room.
Of whom 6 are doing work at a given time.
It's true.
Like the other 4 are checking their phones.
Yeah, they're definitely checking their phones or napping. No, but we all sit at a conference table. Some rooms are couches. On Devious Maids, Mark Cherry liked couches. He didn't like the formality of the table. But typically it's like a large conference table. We're all in those like fancy ergo chairs.
Mm-hmm.
And we sit around.
Oh, Brad, with the best snacks, by the way.
A lot of snacks.
This is what we're missing as a career. We chose poorly.
I was a thin and fit person before I chose comedy writing as my game. Yeah.
Like, try to spot the husband who swings by to visit just for the snacks.
Dave does not come to watch the show. He just hangs out in craft service.
Like I intentionally wear cargo shorts when I go to visit, because there's so many pockets in a cargo short.
Yes, it's true. Yes, they're like, who's that guy? And I said, he's mine.
Who's the guy stealing all the craft services?
Who's the guy that's putting whoopie pies in his pocket?
Why does he have 4 Snicker bar ice creams in his pocket? They're going to melt by the car. So anyways, around the conference table. I'm sorry.
So we're around the conference table, and we first, Mike and I also do our homework. So we like to come in with ideas, and we like to come in already with a rough arc or umbrella for our season. So we always meet in the interim and still talk about stuff, even when we don't know we're being picked up, because, we like it too. And we like to be prepared. And so by the time the season starts, we say, this is what we want to head towards. This is the journey. These are some story ideas. And then our wonderful writer's room helps us fill that out. And then when we're talking about a particular episode, we might say, hey, let's do an episode about immigration. We want to talk about immigration. So we'll talk about immigration stories, and we'll talk about how does that topic affect this family in an organic way. Often it comes from the stories of people. Typically, we don't actually do like a topic of the week. It's just, for example, my brother had called me last year and was like, I was at the beach in San Diego and somebody walked by and told me to go back to Mexico. And I was like, what?
Really?
And he goes, yeah. So this happened. He was like, I was so stunned. I was like, what? Huh? And what's the reply? Like, first of all, I'm not Cuban, but don't say that to other people either, because that's not nice. But also, I'm Cuban. My family is Cuban. Anyway,
affecting racism, but also you're
also don't say that.
Yeah, it's like a multi-tentacled beast. Where do you start? Which tentacle do you start with?
First of all,
we have a lot to unpack here about where your racist.
Excuse me, racist. I must step and educate you. Kumail Nanjiani has a really funny joke about like if the racists were like specific, you'd almost respect it. It was like if they had like a full on, hey, your Cuban parents came over in 1962 during Operation Pedro Pan. They should go back there. Like then you'd sort of be like, well, damn.
Well, they did their research.
At least they did their research. So then I brought that to the room, and I talked in the room about that, and then other people talked about issues of racism that they or their family members have dealt with, and then we talked about so it all kind of comes from then we focus on the family and what's the family specific point of view. So we will break an episode together, meaning we will say, okay, this is the topic. Now that we have the topic, let's break it down scene by scene. And Becky Mann, who's the amazing Becky Mann, is our writing Sherpa. She goes up there and guides us.
Because they have a big, huge whiteboard, right?
We actually, now we don't even have whiteboards. Now all of the boards are painted with whiteboard paint.
Oh, the walls.
Or the walls.
Yeah.
So we write on the walls. So it really feels like you're getting away with something. Like, we're writing on walls. It's,
that thing you were told not to do. Yes.
Yes. It's amazing. So Becky will go up and write on the board, and we will say, first scene is stress in the apartment and Penelope's going to walk it. So we break it down, right? Each scene. And then one writer is assigned to go off and put it together in an outline form. Mm-hmm. That outline will include some bits of dialogue, jokes that are pitched, but usually the journey, usually the ABC of it, the inciting incident, the progressive complication, the climax and the resolution of that particular episode. So, then they'll come back and we'll read it all together, and then we send that off to the studio and network for their thoughts and approvals before they go off to write the script. So by the time they go to write the script, like half of it, the outlines are about 7 or 8 pages. By the time they even just put that into final draft, a lot of it's written for them, and then they just piece the rest in there, and that's really just the fun part. That's the jokes and the sidebar thing. I mean, Mike and I wrote the first episode of season 3 together, and there's this whole sidebar that we just cut where Schneider tells a story about Caesar Augustus and the guard that he would have over his shoulder as he was on the chariot riding through town that said, remember thou art mortal. Yeah. And there was a whole sidebar monologue that Schneider did with that we loved so much. And then we got into the room and they were like, but the Caesar thing. Maybe you want to. I mean, it's 50 pages. We're like, oh yeah, no. But there's no way to keep it. Okay, yeah, So we listen to our writers too, and when there's something that we,
I like that idea. Like, hey boss,
I know this is your episode, but it's 52 pages.
Kind of awkward. So we're about a 30-minute show, that's a 7-minute monologue about Caesar Augustus.
Look, it comes back around in a really amazing way, but they were right and we cut it. But
I love how you're defending it. I mean, I just think it would have worked.
Listen, do I stand by it? I do. But it's not. You will not see it on your.
Well, hold on. What's the monologue? Give us the monologue.
I can't because then I'll reveal things about.
Oh shoot! All right.
Yeah.
No, all right.
Episode 3.
But hold on. Let's go back though. What kind of confidence do you have to listen to somebody who's technically your underling, somebody who's your employee, and have this thing that you really feel strongly about? I mean, when you guys wrote that, you thought it was gold. And then to be able to listen to somebody and hear them say, nah, you know what? It may be good humor, but it's not right for this thing that we've got. How difficult is that to take a step back and take that advice?
I would say every writer's room is so different. And what we hope our writers feel and what we think they feel and certainly hope they feel is that they are all there to do the same job, which is to make a good show and help us make a good show. So we try very quickly to, we have levels on our shows. At the beginning, when you guys are watching television, it's like executive producer, consulting producer, but all of those people are sitting in the room with us. We like to remove those labels, and everyone is just a writer on the show. So the staff writer's idea is just as weighted as the executive producer's idea. And our writer's assistants get jokes in all the time. So every room is different. I was certainly in rooms where I was told staff writers don't speak and women don't sit next to each other and crazy, me too, me too.
That. Really?
Lots of me too, guys. But this is hopefully a space where we feel like everyone is given the same amount of weight in terms of their notes. So, when everyone in the room is saying that to Mike and I, we go, all right, we try to be democratic. And look, there are times when the room says this and Mike and I do something else. Yeah, there's that too. And we have the ability to guide that because we're ultimately the showrunners. We are the ones that decide what goes in and what doesn't.
Right.
But also, I think seeing her work, I think she also knows, and you can correct me, Glo, if I'm wrong, that jokes are a dime a dozen. And so if the room collectively says, hey, just swap it out for another joke or for another, you're like, okay, you.
Yeah, also best joke wins. I mean, it's often if there's stuff that's in the room that people are laughing at, all of us are laughing at something, that's going in.
Yeah. For the best of everybody.
And if the husband is on the floor on show night and leans in and suggests a joke, that's not going in. No one's going to put that one in. So definitely best joke wins.
Have you ever suggested a joke that went in?
Me? No. Oh, maybe in script
maybe.
Form. Yeah, so this is an interesting thing. We don't actually jump on each other's.
No, we don't. We're weird
that much.
We don't really read each other's stuff.
Yeah. Well,
I read Sheldon, but I read every 10th drive, and it never makes sense to me because I don't think I followed it long enough.
Yeah.
But I read Sheldon every day.
Yeah, but to be fair though, Drive is long form sci-fi, which has never really been your wheelhouse.
No, it's not my wheelhouse.
And on a flip note,
certain shows you've never even seen an episode of.
Well, the most like for me, Glow also has a massive love for theater, and there's a lot of times where I would rather pay to get out of going to theater. Sure. Not necessarily hers, but like right. If you're like, oh, there's a musical, like guess who's paying to get out of that musical? It's Dave Kellett. I'd rather have to kill a horse than have to go see your average musical.
No horses were killed in this.
Yeah, exactly. But so like we tend not to be up in each other's grill about creative, and I think that helps. Don't you think?
Oh gosh, that was the first thought in my mind, was that way lies some real disaster, because inevitably there's going to be a difference of creative opinion, and then it's one thing to have that with a person, it's another thing to have that with a person who is your spouse.
Yeah, well, there have been times where I've written a script or a strip, or Glow has written a script. Boy, that's hard to say. And the other one will lean and be like, hey, what about this? And the first one kind of goes, I don't know. I kind of like that, my version. And so like, it's funny that we both are egotistical enough to be like, I love you so much, and I'm going to keep it the way I got it. I'm fine. You go back to cooking.
You do you.
Yeah, you go back to doing the dishes. I'll keep writing this. And so
Well, and although you're both very funny, you both have very different flavors of humor.
That's more the thing.
That's true.
Is that we know on an intuitive level what fits within our comedic world. And so if I suggest something for one day at a time, and she's like, I don't know.
No, it's always high pitched.
Yeah, it always gets really squeaky.
It always gets real squeaky.
But
you know, the higher the pitch goes, the more in trouble you are.
Exactly.
When dogs are barking, you're like, oh boy.
So the thing that I find interesting about Glow, and I would love for you to talk about this, because cartoonists don't. Maybe we do have this, but the thing that I have noticed and respected and found interesting about you is that when you always say, "Oh, I found my muse," and it's when you hire or find a specific actor.
Yes.
And then you're like, all of a sudden the words start flowing for you because can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, that's been since my theater days. So I basically started writing because the parts available to me were, well, fairly non-existent, because, 12 years ago when I was auditioning in Los Angeles, people either wanted Sofia Vergara or Rosie Perez. That was really like, if you were a Latina on TV, you sort of fell within one of those two, or you were like a gangbanger's girlfriend or sister. And I'm just none of those things. I'm like Janine Garofalo, but Latina. Like, it's not, there's not a, the cute best friend who's Latina. Like that just wasn't a person that was getting hired. And so agents really didn't know what to do with me. They felt like I looked too white. And every audition I did go out on was like, I've made this joke a million times, but like, Chewie, put the gun down. Orale, don't kill my baby. Like it was like crazy stereotyped. Like, are you kidding me? Stop.
Yeah, where you're looking at the script going, who writes this stuff?
It really was like, prostitute? Okay. Here we go. And like,
what will you be reading for today? Latina prostitute number 4.
Yes, And then, I don't get, I'm not, so anyway, I got very frustrated, and I thought, well, certainly there must be other people that look and sound the way I do. And I'm first generation. Like, my parents came here and knew like 4 words of English, and this is how I sound. And I went to graduate school, and So, my frustration led me to action, which I'm very grateful for. And so the writing is really what started to get me attention. And I just rode the horse in the direction it was going. And what would happen is, as I was writing, I was at the beginning of my writing, I was writing for me. And even my men were things I would say. So everyone was sort of in my voice. And it wasn't until I started working with other actors, and when I would be working with those actors, suddenly something would come alive in me. And it was as though, I don't know, like something else like takes over. Like I often say, if I don't remember writing the script, it's probably pretty good, because I was just in a zone, and sort of something else was happening. There was a creative juice or something that was happening that allowed me to just funnel into this creativity for the moment of that writing session. So there are actors that you work with them and it's lovely and you have a great experience. And then there's actors that you work with that like they start talking to you as their character. And it's just unreal.
But like as you're falling asleep, or like, she'll be in a car or over, sitting on a bed about to watch something, and all of a sudden the laptop comes out and she's like, she types so fast, by the way. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, I had lunch with the actor today, and now I know how to do it because I hear their voice in my head, and it's fascinating because as cartoonists we don't have that. We can create a character and then they are fully realized in our head. But what's interesting for Gloria's process as a TV writer is that once she meets the actor, it's almost like then the muse really kicks in, And
also, I think there's something that happens, because the other thing that happens that's crazy is a lot of times similar things will happen in their lives or have happened in their lives that I write. Because there's sort of an intuitiveness that you pull from them. Yeah. So anyway, but I've been very blessed. I've had my muse, Kate McCucci was a muse, Jolie Jenkins, Todd Grinnell, Joe Manganiello, Kobe Smulders. Like my muses are now famous people, but they at the beginning there was just, and I would be able to write again and again and again in different characters. That was the other thing. They wouldn't just speak as one character. It was that the next time they'd be, Jolie, I've written so much for Jolie Jenkins, who's on Alexa and Katie on Netflix. She's also recurs on One Day at a Time.
And for context, what Gloria's talking about is when we first moved to LA, you know how, Brad, we always say you got to make your own magic with your career. Like you've got to make it happen. Like Gloria realized early on as a TV writer that the way you make that magic happen was if you want to break into TV, you start putting up your own plays around Los Angeles and inviting agents. And so she would write.
Well, that's how I got my agents and my managers.
Right. But I'm super proud of you because in your 20s, you're like, no, F it. I'm making my own shows and creating my own worlds.
That's right.
And she would do these monologue shows with, 13 to 15 actors, I would say, or actresses and actors. And she would put them up and she would get these huge responses from agencies and then eventually from networks. I remember when networks started coming. And like you'd be like, the NBC head of comedy is in the audience. But it's, she was 24 and paying for and putting up her own shows. And by the way, making a profit on it. I remember that.
A little bit.
Not a lot, but beer and pizza money.
We took the cast out at the end.
Yeah. But anyway, Brad, I was always proud of her because you can wait around as an artist a lot in your life and be like, someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, now you are anointed and now you have a career. Exactly. But like we always say for cartoonists, Gloria absolutely made her own magic. So when she's talking about when she found all these actors that were muses for her, these were all monologue shows, and she would cast
or short plays. I did monologues initially, and then I did short plays, like 12 to 15-minute plays.
But it was so fun because in doing so, and also in giving them incredible material, a lot of these actors would get agents and get work. Remember that started happening? And be like, oh, wow, now they're on Showtime because of your show that you wrote in a small little theater in LA. Anyway, so I was always super proud of her because and it's something I think because she teaches now at the college level. Listen to me, I'm now like a proud
I know.
I'm like a proud
it's really
husband.
cute.
And also, Brad, she makes an incredible
sangria. I do
she does an incredible sangria.
I do make a great sangria.
Now I'm listening.
Yeah, now Brad perks up.
Very good.
Well, listen, Gloria, I want to ask you this because I'm fast. There's so much that you do that is in lockstep with what people like Dave and I do. And there's so much that it's like you're from a completely different planet. And I want to talk about the concept of writing as a team. You mentioned working with Mike. Now, do you guys have to sit down, like when you first start out, do you have to sit down and work out creative ground rules? Like, okay, this is how we're going to interact. Because it seems to me that it would be so easy to get on somebody's bad side inadvertently through the process of working this stuff out.
That's so interesting. So Mike and I are both solo writers that were basically an arranged marriage by Norman Lear to do this show. So he's somebody that's used to writing alone. I'm somebody that's used to writing alone. And then we were put together for this particular project. Now we've both been in comedy writing rooms, so we know we're obviously used to the group think and that process. But it was interesting to start. I mean, and actually, to be fair, Mike has collaborated many times. He collaborated with Ray Romano on Men of a Certain Age and Louis C.K. That's unfortunate now for Lucky Louie. So he had, and Kevin Beagle for Enlisted.
Right.
So
yes, we did have a team.
Yeah, he had done a couple of, so I think he was already in a headspace of knowing how to do that successfully.
And you, early in your career, had a writing
I did
partner.
have a writing partner very early on. And there's something nice and, it's lonely writing alone.
Yeah.
So having a partner to even just pitch things and then they laugh and you go, all right, well, somebody thinks that's funny aside from me.
Yeah.
So we never did have a meeting about ground rules. I'm really fortunate because Mike is a really good person and a very nice man. Like we sat down, the concern when you are female and the person of color on any show, and actually young as well, when you are partnered with someone else that's older than you, the concern is always, are they just going to take over? And I'm an on paper partnership. Yeah. The first time Mike and I sat down, the first words out of his mouth were, we're partners. We're doing everything together.
That had to have been a relief.
Oh, it was such a relief. And then that was true. That not only true, but he lifted me up and supported me
he's been great
in so many ways. I've loved working with him. So I was very fortunate. I think that everybody wishes that they had a Mike Royce to sort of introduce them to show running. Certainly to be able to do it with him. Season 1, he was my teacher. Season 2, he was my mentor. And I feel like now we're just partners. And we learned so very much from one another. And he supported me in my directing and we separate duties too.
To clarify, because I think this is important, I don't think that he was teaching you writing. You had already been doing 8 to 10
right,
seasons
but the
of
job,
TV writing.
this is what's fascinating.
She's now a showrunner, Brad, which means she's running the whole TV show.
Yes,
so
the running of the show is the running of the show is a very different skill set than writing. Very different. It's really dealing with people and dealing with clarity of communication with every aspect of production. I mean, it still blows my mind that I write, fancy restaurant evening, and then we show up on the set and they built a restaurant. I mean, it's like, what? With the pilot I just did, it was like beautiful, like woodsy Portland cool restaurant. That's what I said I wanted. There was a wall of like ferns and like moss.
They built fireplaces.
They had a wine wall. It was it blew my mind.
Can I tell you my favorite part of this, Brad? Is Glo, who is 5'1" and a writer, but now a showrunner. And so to see her interact with the heads of department is amazing, because when she goes down to talk to the set guys, it'll be like a 6'4", 300-pound union guy going, "Sure thing, Gloria, whatever you want. I'm happy to change that fireplace around." She's like, no, okay, yeah, I just would look a little bit.
Actually, Bernie Vince is tall and thin, but
But Gloria, that did not fit with the voice that Dave wanted
Ron
to do.
Olson, also Thin Man. Neither of them speak that way.
Not specifically in this moment on this show.
Take
but
down
just
the Union Boys.
No, I'm just saying it's funny. It's funny and awesome to see you being like working. But you're also, she now has to work with props, with costuming, with lighting, with camera work.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. And so those first seasons, Mike was really
wonderful,
kind, and showed her the ropes on that stuff.
So now listen, you and Mike get together. You've determined that your arranged marriage is a happy one, right? And you're starting out. Now you've got to hire the writing room. And you said you had between 6 and 12 people in the writer's room?
Entities, yes.
How do you make the decision who makes it and who doesn't? I mean, obviously you're looking for funny. Are there other intangibles?
Oh, there's millions of factors. Yes. Well, for this show in particular, and this is also where I got a lot of support, I was used to being the only Latina in the room, with the exception of Devious Maids, where I met the wonderful Tanya Sriracha, who now has her own show on Stars called Vida. Check it out. But that was the only time I ever worked with another Latina. And we were doing a show about a Hispanic family. And I wanted other Latinx perspectives in the room to talk about our shared experience and also what was different. And so having a large contingency of Latinos was very important to me. And also women was very important to me.
Well, and it totally makes sense. It's also a female-led show, a Latinx family. Like you need that.
But by the way, in general, that should exist on every show. There should be more diversity on shows.
But like in traditional Hollywood, it would have been like 10, 65-year-old white guys writing a Latinx family led by women. You know, and you would have been like, "What's going on?" You know.
Yes, I know. So, in fact, it's very interesting because this year there was a bit of a step back. I've heard from a lot of writers on staffs like, walked in a lot of white dudes, and it's like, that's fine. It's just that's what we've heard stories from this batch for a while. Let's mix it up.
Yeah.
So mix it up. So yes, those were important to me, and thankfully, those were also important to Mike and also important to Norman. So then what happens is we ask for writers. We ask the agencies for writers. We tell them what we're looking for specifically. We start to get samples. When we started One Day at a Time, there are ebbs and flows with what's in vogue in writing. And the multicam goes through ebbs and flows. It is, in the 80s, it was obviously enormous. Like all those shows were multicams, Cosby Show, Family Ties, Growing Pains, Facts of Life, wonderful, Cheers, Frasier, really excellent, high quality shows that were multicam. And then it went out of fashion for a period of time. It got cheesy and it got too joke driven. I think some of that may be due to the advertising. 25 minutes was what an episode of television used to be when I was growing up. It's now 20 minutes. So that's 5 extra minutes.
Now 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh, biscuits.
It's 10 minutes of commercial and 20 minutes of content.
Yeah, and so, but part of, to give context, Brad, what happened there with sitcom is that instead of going like on Family Ties, instead of there being a story arc in which there are jokes, but you're also coming to know and love the characters, now it became King of Queens, where it's like setup, punchline, setup, punchline, setup, punchline.
Characters and jokes, but not a lot of time to do the bottom, not a lot of time to do the heart. Difficult to do in that period of time, and then also to ramp up to it and then have a commercial break. So I love multicams because they're very similar to plays, and I love theater. So I've always loved doing multicams, and I got to do a hybrid. How I Met Your Mother was a hybrid. We did not shoot in front of an audience. The laughter that was heard on that show was what's called canned laughter. There's a guy that comes in the aftermath and has a machine and puts in the laughs. But Rules of Engagement was a live studio audience show. We had a live audience of 250 people that would come every week, and those actors would perform it like a play, and we would run in alts and have that whole experience. And I loved the experience of that. So we were in a time when we were pitching One Day at a Time when it was a little bit out of fashion, but we were hoping we could make it come back. And obviously working with Norman and the pedigree of his shows and the drama of his shows. I mean, I highly encourage anyone who's not familiar with Norman's work to go check out some of those old shows. They were actually quite dramatic and heavy.
Oh, yeah.
What he was able to do.
Yeah, all of the family had arcs that you'd be
Maude, incredible. And so we wanted to do this multicam, and we both liked drama with comedy. And so we just sort of work together to make that happen.
It's a special energy, Brad, when you're on a live studio audience set. It's so, having been on set with How I Met Your Mother, which was fun and lovely, and the energy was great, and everybody loved each other. But the energy of a live studio audience, you should come out, Brad.
Oh,
this
you
season.
should come. By the way, anyone listening to this, it's free. It is free to come. It is. It's free. My Twitter has all of the show dates. You contact TV Audiences Unlimited, I believe, is doing our audiences, and or you can email the show. I put the email address right up on my Twitter, and people can come and see it. It's about 5 to 6 hours, which seems like a lot, but it goes by quite quickly.
Yeah.
And you get to see everything, the inner workings, the actors running off to change, us rewriting lines and running them into the actors. It's a really unique and fascinating experience to do.
Yeah, so please come if you're in the Southern California area. It's super fun to have you there. So, yeah. And if your name is Brad, text me after the show and put on some cargo shorts and be prepared to fill it with craft services.
That's right, and then run for the exit.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Put 9 ice cream sandwiches in your shorts if you're Brad. And
so now here's my next question. We talked earlier I think we talked about this, Dave, on ComicLab, where I had found something that somebody had deemed the sitcom writing template. And what this was they said in writing a sitcom, the story has to reach a certain point by the first 3 minutes. Minutes 1 through 3, you establish, who everybody is. Minutes 4 through 5, if you're doing a story A, story B, story, kind of like Seinfeld, where there's 2 storylines that go back and forth. Story A, you introduce the conflict, the quest in minutes 4 through 5. Then minutes 6 through 8, you introduce story B. That's the subplot. Then minute 9, protagonist tries again. And so you can see where this is going. This goes all the way through the 19th and a 20th minute. And I read this when I was kind of retooling Evil Inc. I was reading this and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've wanted to take it from a comic strip to a comic book type of idea. And if I translate a minute of sitcom into a page of comic book, this works perfectly. It's a 22 page comic. And using that, I was able, and for me, just for me, I'm not saying this is for everybody, it was the framework I needed to help guide my writing, because after doing years and years of comic strip, I felt like a pig on skates when it came to writing a longer form.
Pig on skates.
Oh, I felt very awkward. My question to you is, now I've been doing this for 2 years now, is this the way actual sitcoms get written?
Nope.
Oh, shit. Well, good night, everybody. And making a living from comics.
I had to do that for comedic effect. No, here's what I will say. I think that loosely, yes, right? I think those are the initial rules. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that I did not go to school for television writing. I was a communications and theater major, and then I went to grad school for performance and playwriting. So when I came back to Los Angeles, I went to the Paley Center, which was the Museum of TV and Radio in Beverly Hills, and I would watch and break down, like you're talking about, break down episodes of television that are roughly exactly what you just described, right? So roughly speaking, that is how they break down. And then so I think it's one of those things where you have to know those rules to roughly break stories down in that way. But also what happens over time is that audiences are incredibly savvy. So which is I think why I can't watch procedurals every week, but people love watching procedurals because they know that they're going to meet the person that did it within a certain amount of time. And then by the end, that person gets caught, and they like that laid out journey. So loosely speaking, yes, that is the journey, but it's not that precise. I would say mostly what it is there's an inciting incident, there's the progressive complication, there's the climax, and then there's the resolution. Loosely speaking, that's the rough beats. And then with sitcom, especially with what Mike and I do on the show, we're really fortunate to write on Netflix where we don't have the time constraints that I was speaking of.
Yeah.
So our shows are 28 minutes, 26 minutes, whatever time it takes us to tell the story in a way that we find satisfying. We are fortunate to be able to do. So we got a lot of that extra texture that that network, doesn't have the luxury of utilizing. So it means that, the A story, we try to probably launch the A story and B story in the first scene, at least the A story for sure, but it's not that specific in terms of the page, but roughly the layout would be about that.
So now, in terms of doing something for commercial TV, how do you get the timing right so that it ends just before you cut to commercial?
Well, that's where you do have that's where you have page constraints. That's why the scenes tend to be shorter.
Yeah.
You have to roughly break it every network has their own rules. So sometimes it's like 13, you got to do a thing. Also, the concept of the cold open, there's either cold open, act 1, act 2 tag, or 4 acts. Right? But there's 4 parts, typically speaking, to sometimes 3 parts that they'll break it up to. I don't love 3 parts. I think 4 is better. And then as the writer, you often get to have a say in how you want that broken up. So if you're doing 4 acts, you want to launch that story in the first act. If you are doing just a cold open, then the first thing is a joke that gets them to, because you're going to go right to commercial. So joke, commercial, and then you're launching your A story in act 1.
Yeah.
And then you have the luxury of going to, your act break, then there's a commercial, you come back, you finish it off, and then the tag is just a freestanding joke again.
Right.
So neither of those have to be on story, or they could be a funny little side bit of the story that wraps it up further, but isn't the actual conclusion, especially now where they shrink the images, things move up and they start doing the credits.
Netflix does that, don't they?
They do they do that on network TV all the time.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, because they also throw like the news is like coming up on channel 7.
So you don't want to do anything. You want to really finish your story already. And so there's but roughly speaking, I like the 4 parts, and then you decide how you want to break up those 4 parts.
And also talk for a second about the advantages about writing for Netflix, because I've seen the way I always like to describe Gloria's writing, Brad, is that her style is laughter through tears. And the reason I think that's such an apt description is that there is meaning in her writing. You care about the characters. They have genuine moments. And then intermixed with these terrible, painful moments of life, there's also love and warmth and joy and laughter. So you're laughing through tears.
I mean, he really likes me. So he thinks that. Not,
Well, as you know from the beginning of the show, we've been married for 26 years.
Nope.
So, not 26.
Nope.
We have been married for 4 years.
Nope.
The 17 years.
Nope.
17 years. Third time's the charm.
But together 7 years before that. So.
That's right. Yeah. We have been together 24
Well,
years.
you guys had a long courtship as well.
We did.
we met doing high school theater, Brad.
Yes, we did.
Wow.
So lest you think that high school theater doesn't get you anything in life, for me, it got me my love and my partner and best friend for my life. So that's
worked out pretty well.
So high school theater, try it out if you're listening. I don't know.
Yeah.
All it got me was a realization that I'm allergic to pancake makeup.
Well, that's an important thing to find out early.
It's good to know now before
to find out early.
You don't want to learn that in your 40s, Brad.
You don't.
No, God, no.
So, but what I was going to say was, for her writing the laughter through tears style on Netflix is great, because if they, in all seriousness, if you go to Netflix and say like, hey, we need to do a 35-40 minute show, they wouldn't say no.
No,
they would say like, listen, if you can do it closer to 30, that's fine. But
yeah, they prefer to be under 30. But
your season ender for season 2,
I think our season ender was longer. Was maybe 32 minutes. Maybe we tried to cut as much as we could, but
Brad,
it was 50 minutes.
You couldn't have cut. You couldn't have cut too much from that last episode. That last episode was like compelling from minute to minute.
Oh,
well, and like compare that 32 episode, Brad, to something on CBS that would be 20 minutes. It's harder to pack. I mean, as a writer, it's harder to pack in more.
And I would look also, it's hard to do commercials. It is hard. Our show, One Day at a Time, has no music, which is kind of unheard of. The music that we have on the show is music that they might be playing.
It's plot driven, yeah.
Right? But it's never like, ba-dum-bum, and we're back into the scene. And then somebody says a punchline and ba-dum-bum, and then we're at a commercial. None of that happens because we don't have to transition in and out of commercials. But when I just did a pilot for CBS where I wanted to have no music again. And then I realized like, oh no, the audience needs a cue. They need something to let you know, like, and we're back.
Yeah.
And
really.
that's why Seinfeld would have that little bass riff. Bum,
Yeah,
bum,
boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
Yes, it lets you know,
and we're
back.
I never thought about that. But yeah, you've got to have a cue.
Remember in Amadeus when Salieri says to Mozart, "You've got to let them know when it's done." You know,
Yeah.
Remember that part? I feel like that's what TV music has to do. It has to let you know, like the commercials are done. Now you're back into the show. You know.
And then also, but I've been also really fascinated because in doing my research when I sold this show to CBS, I hadn't watched a lot of CBS shows in a while, and so I wanted to rewatch. And I was watching, I don't know, one of those shows, right, that was on. And it was completely scored. It was like a scene between people. There was music under the entire thing.
Wow.
That was really manipulating. And it was like, because some people give us guff for the laughter because they think it's a laugh track. And even if they don't think it's a laugh track, they don't love that there's a studio audience. They're telling them how to think or feel.
Right.
Yeah.
It's you either like it or you don't, or you can shut it off or you can't. So that's one of the criticisms of the show, I suppose. But I'm watching those shows going, and what's this? With like, boom, 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 boom. I'm like, that's telling you.
Also, that costs so much money for CBS.
Oh, it costs so much money. But it's not just CBS. There's tons of shows that score everything, and that's just as much as a laugh track.
But those procedurals generate so much cash.
Oh,
they're
doing just fine.
So we need a 40-piece orchestra, Brad, to come in this week for CSI. All right, no problem. Yeah. Meanwhile, they're backing up the money truck for CSI.
Well, so now, as long as we're on this topic, talk to me about editing for humor. Because one thing Dave and I talked about a while ago is that a lot of the real work in writing comedy is editing. It's not necessarily coming up with that first idea. It's coming up with that first idea and then pushing it and then pushing it and then trimming it. What's your approach to editing?
I would say that's one of the beauties of multicam as well, is that here's the schedule of a multicam. Once the script has been approved and we put it kind of quickly through the room to get just a couple of joke punch-ups. Then, for example, this will literally start on one day at a time on Monday. They will come in, the actors will come in at 10 o'clock, as will the studio and the network and the writers. And we will all sit down and they will do what is called a table read, where they sit at a table and they read the script out loud.
And Brad, also, there are good craft services there too. So just so you know,
everywhere,
when you come.
Let's make it very clear, everywhere there's food. America, we are gluttonous. So we hear the script out loud. And then after we hear it, Mike and I, and when you're hearing it, things become very clear. That's funny. That's funny. Oh, no one cares about this. Cut.
Right.
That's funny. That's funny. This is funny, but weird and off topic. That's funny. That's not funny. Punch, punch, punch. Right. So after a script, after a table read, your script is marked with I do a line if I want to look at it because it doesn't make sense. A P is punch. A check mark is funny.
Yeah.
So then the studio network will sit down with us. We're very fortunate. Sony and Netflix give us very few notes. And when they do give us notes, they seem to be quite intelligent. So, And then Mike and I always have a ton of notes. And I think that's part of the reason why they don't give us that many notes. They know we have far more notes than they'll ever give us. Yeah. Then we go up to the room and do a rewrite. And that rewrite will go out Monday night. Then Tuesday morning, the actors come at 8 a.m. and they read through the changes of the script. And then they put it on its feet with the director. And then at 2 o'clock, they'll say, hey, come on down. We put it on its feet. Check it out. So then we come down as producers. We watch them go from room to room, from set to set, and perform it now on its feet. Because some jokes play better in the comedic, the physical comedy. Then again, we afterwards sit with one another and say, all right, well, that does work now, but this doesn't work. And this does. So it's the seeing of it and then the discussion of the seeing of it that helps us in the process. So that by the time, and then Wednesday, same thing will happen. The actors will come at 8 a.m., new script. They go through it again and reblock it. Then the network and the studio will come down at around noon and we'll see it all on its feet. And then they'll give their feedback. And then we'll do sort of our final big rewrite. And then Thursday we'll pre-shoot scenes. typically things that happen in cars or happen in side sets, which we call swing sets, things that are not in front of the audience. We'll pre-shoot those things. And then everything else we'll walk through with the cameras now. Now the cameras are in there and it's picking up, like, how do we get the funny things that we've set up? How do we get the cameras to pick that up in a humorous way?
Yeah.
And then on Friday, an audience comes and they perform it for a live audience. And then Monday, the process starts all over again. So that is how that week goes. So it is edited every day up until the moment we're shooting. And even when we're shooting, if a joke doesn't land the way we thought it would, we have a book of alts that the writers will come up with, and also alts on the fly, where they'll say, what about this? What about this? What about this? We have a little huddle. We'll run in, throw another line at one of them, see if that gets a better response. And maybe that's the joke that we'll get into the final episode. So that's that editing process. And then once it goes into the editing bay, the editors often they really take air out. They really do a lot of the editing of the jokes also in the editing bay. So they'll tighten. Mike is incredible at, like, take 2 frames out of that, take 2 frames out of this, add 4 frames to that.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable.
And it's all with an eye and an ear towards the timing of the joke, tightening that tension up and then releasing it.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
So that's typically what the process is for us. And in betwixt all of that, we are prepping other episodes, we're writing other episodes, we're editing other episodes. So the season is quite chaotic, a controlled chaos. And these actors are incredible in that they learn to play a week and then perform that in front of an audience.
Well, that's something that I wanted to point out, because I had a sense of it earlier. And it's something that, speaking now to the cartoonists that are listening to the show, and if you've got a comic that you've been working on for a while and it just isn't getting the traction that you think it should, and you know your art is good, or to be fair, the art is never as important as the writing. Take a listen to all of the layers and the labor of editing that happens in the process of that 1 week. And I think, for me included, for most cartoonists looking to up their game, the answer is in the fact that most of us write a joke, look at it, think it's funny, start drawing, put it out there, and move on to the next thing. And there's almost no layers of editing, right? And I think that you could really learn a lot from the process that Gloria's and again, something that I'm furiously over here jotting down notes to remind myself to use some of this, because so much of the quality of what's being created there is in the editing.
Yeah. The thing that I find too, that I'm so envious of Gloria and her process and her life, her creative life, is that it's kind of a version of what we were talking with Erica Moen about with her studio setup for Helioscope. Is that you know how, Brad, you always say ideas are dime a dozen, it's the execution that's important.
Yeah.
For me, the advantage of a writer's room is that you can literally just throw out 100 ideas. But then in the assignment of the script to someone, that's where the execution happens. You know, that's where the style comes in. But there's a magic in having 10, 12 really funny people around a room spitballing. And that's the part that I'm super envious of, is that the energy is up, the joy is up, you're feeding off of the energy of each other. And then you also get to go off and write it by yourself as a writer. And
but something that's very interesting, and I think what we're probably envious of what I'm envious of in Dave's creative process, is that it is still a group thing always.
Oh yeah.
Now I get to be a showrunner along with Mike, and so for the most part, we get to do almost everything that we want to do. But there are still a lot of entities that have to approve that. And sometimes they'll say, well, we're not sure about this and we're not sure about that. And so you're spending some of your days defending what you want to do. And sometimes you do have to make those changes. You have to make a change here or change there, or there's a joke that you have to make a change because they don't love this or they don't love that. So you're still having to, it's not pure. Like what you guys get to do is, if you write that one joke and you put it up, no one is saying you can't do that. And that's true. that's pretty special too.
Yeah, no, I'm just enough of a grump that the fact that I don't have a boss is huge, a huge joy to me. There's no argument.
Oh, I know it works better for me as well. But there is something to be said for that, for that writing and rewriting and rewriting. It clearly yields great results.
Well, like in my deepest fantasies, Brad, what I wish I had was my own cartooning studio, everything I have right now. But in the morning, for 3 hours, I could gather 10 of my funniest and best cartoonist friends into a room, and we could all just spitball off each other for their own work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that be joy-filled to just have a writer's room of cartoonists?
You could do that.
I could do that. Yeah. I like that my wife solves the problem in 2 seconds. She's like, Skype exists.
Yeah,
like,
Skype exists. Just start your morning at 8 o'clock, and you guys all talk about stuff and talk about each other's stuff. You could do that. That's a thing you can do. Actually, in your hands, possible. It's totally possible.
Brad, this is why whenever there is success in my life, it's because my wife goes, all right, well, you could solve that problem. You could just
a dream that's a reality. Actually, it's possible.
That's what 14 years of wedded bliss will give you.
That's right. Or as I like to think of it, 19 years.
Here's the deal, Gloria. I know that we are getting right up against the time where you need to rush out and take care of some business. So although I've got 100 more questions for you, can we have you back sometime?
I mean, I literally live with the man who you do this with. Yes, of course. I would love to come back.
In the meantime, Gloria, thank you so much for having us on your show.
All right, Brad, you get a walk-on roll.
Thank you so much for having. Thank you for being here. This has been fascinating.
And definitely check out One Day at a Time on Netflix, which is airing around the world.
Yes.
When's the new season dropping?
We don't know. Netflix does not tell us these things.
Oh.
2019, early 2019.
Somewhere early, first quarter of 2019, probably.
Hopefully.
I am on tenterhooks.
Yes.
Well, on that note, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net.
Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice, patreon.com/comiclab.
And before we close it out for the week, I just want to thank my wife for our 38 years of marriage.
May you have many, many more.